Speaking of the presidential libraries, whose did you find to be the most friendly and whose to be the least friendly to somebody trying to come in and get
information? Well, I did these in a while back, but I thought the best library was Lyndon Johnson's library, and there was a lot of information there, and it was easily retrievable.
And do you think that's an obligation they have to scholars?
Well,
like you?
and I think that most presidents do too. The library benefited by having Johnson alive after his presidency, because he talked to aides about putting their records in, not just his records, but their records were there as well. And they had archivists who had a good sense of what communications was. The worst library that I had to deal with was the Kennedy Library.
Oh, the Kennedy Library.
Yeah, and the Kennedy Library was difficult getting information. In order to get into Pierre Salinger's records,
secret combination.
Well, it sure was. It was finding Pierre Salinger. That he had to give permission.
Well, you still could.
So we finally got him in Montreal. Ultimately, his records.
I don't know what they're going to do about that now.
Well, the records were opened,
okay.
and gradually they've opened more and more records. But I think what happens is that if you don't have the president there when the library opens, then all of the relatives and all of the staff want to protect his image the way they think of it. And so they want only good things to come out, what they see as good things. And that's the problem of having relatives control it, because presidents understand that some things you do well with, some things are messed up. But in all of it, you need to get all of it out for people to have a good sense of what your administration was. And I think that's why the Johnson Library has been so good, and why the Kennedy one wasn't.
It's interesting you say that, because we had a Clinton biographer here a few weeks ago saying that that the Clintons make his library very inaccessible to anybody trying to do any research. Did you not have that experience?
The libraries, most of the libraries I dealt with were libraries that preceded the Presidential Records Act. The Presidential Records Act brings in all the libraries papers are public, public papers, and there's certain sets of rules that surround them. The deed of gift libraries, which were Carter and before, those are much easier to deal with, because those papers have been deeded and they don't have the same kinds of restrictions around them. And I think they were meaning to make things easier, but even in the Reagan Library, I think it's only something like 15% of the material has been opened. And so you can imagine how long it's going to take the Clinton material to come out.
What's the one or two pieces of information you most wanted to get that you couldn't get to?
Well, perhaps presidential thinking. Having presidents talk about where communications coming into governing. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to get presidential interviews. I interviewed.
Did you think it was fruitless?
I think it's the kind of thing. It is such a time suck. That I remember trying to get an interview in 1976 with Carter on the campaign, and that was on the book that I was working with a co-author, and that was my job to try to do that. And we finally had it lined up was to be on a plane going from one stop to another, and then it got postponed, then it got canceled, and I thought, I'm just not spending any more time on this. It's just eat you up. But I'll have to say that the benefit of it was that when Carter came in, I knew everybody in the press office. And people were certainly very, very good to me, as Rex Grantham and Dale Lieback,
who are here,
who are back there. Yeah.
But did you ever talk to Carter?
I talked to Carter in January.
Fine.
But it was at a conference on the Carter presidency, and I did a paper on his press operations.
But I guess you could say perhaps that the success of the communications part of the project. Even though you wanted to get inside their heads and get their thinking, you were able to get to the people who could actually help you map how it works and whether it works. And in that context, who of the presidents was the most, I guess I want to say, who most hindered or helped their communications wing?
Well, Carter made a decision fairly early on that I think made it difficult for their communications, and that was not to have an Office of Communications. And that really tracks back.
Sort of gets
Sorry,
the point
guys.
across.
But that goes back to the Office of Communications as being viewed in the Nixon administration, where it was formed.
That's when it first got the name.
Right, in 1969. It was created by Nixon.
And to oversee even the press secretary, or to be an adjunct.
It was to be an adjunct, but at times, and in some administrations,
depends
it
on
has
who
been
the
an
communications director is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the Nixon administration, I think, gave it there was such a bad odor.
I
with
think
it,
bad name is
where people like Coulson worked in the Office of Communications.
Well, it became a wing of Watergate disinformation.
Yeah. And Ford didn't really use it until the campaign, and then they brought David Gergen in, and then they used it as a way of coordinating with the committee, the President Ford committee that was headed by James Baker. And so Gergen was kind of Baker's person in the White House, and then they coordinated all their publicity and did a really superb job of using the White House as a setting for their election campaign.
In the Bush White House, who had more authority, access, the communications director or the press secretary?
Well, the communications person is going to be involved in the long-range planning and coordination as well. And so the press secretary becomes part of that. Press secretary's job really focuses around daily operations. There are 2 briefings a day. Like, for example, Dana Perino had one at 9:30 this morning, which is an off-camera briefing known as the gaggle. And then I think her briefing this afternoon was at 12:30 or 1, which is the on-camera briefing.
Kept you away. Thank you for giving it up to be here with us.
And that involves a lot of preparation, because you have to talk to the public affairs people at the State Department. There's usually a conference call in late morning with DOD, with State, CIA, and any departments are going to be involved in the news for that day. So preparing for the briefing is a lot of work, and in some sense, the gaggle is a preparation for the briefing, because in the gaggle, the press secretary learns what's on reporters' minds, and then they can, if they want, they can, instead of making a statement at that point about the issue they're being asked about. One of the things McCurry used to do is, if he was asked about a policy issue, he would say, "I'll deal with that at 1 o'clock." And so then he would use the morning to make sure that he had a mature answer by the time he went on
How many
television.
hours of planning has already happened within the administration before the gaggle? How many meetings?
You have, it will depend on the administration, but say in the Clinton administration, the chief of staff, well, at least Panetta did it, and I think Podesta as well. The chief of staff is going to have key people that will include communications people to talk about what they want out that day and what their responses are to things that have happened overnight. So they plan out defense and offense. And then they go into, say, in this administration, the press secretary, when Scott McClellan was press secretary, he would see the president by himself at 7 o'clock or before, whenever the president came in. So
do you expect him to totally sell out the administration?
I think he's going to talk about what he did.